Oh,
Hello, thank you for joining. We are going to mute all participants. If you have any questions, please leave them in the chat. Those who are presenting can unmute yourselves. Hello, welcome. Thank you for joining. Thank you for leaving your introduction in the chat also. I'm going to share a screen for Women's Prayer. Let us pray. O God, creator of all life, bless the unsung lives of countless Christian women in every century who are your hands and feet, who kept alive your compassionate presence by feeding the hungry, nursing the sick, clothing the naked, comforting the sad, praying and petitioning, strengthening those in prison, teaching the stories, sowing and singing, weeping and rejoicing. Grant us the wisdom to discern our ministries in this day, as our foremothers found theirs. Lead us in new and timeless forms of discipleship, and let us joyfully find our place in this procession of praise. Offering our varied gifts and voices together with them and Mary, the mother of our Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining Episcopal Women's History Project's Lantern series. We are on March 12th, so we will have two more to go. Today, we are going to have Heather Huyck sharing about Reverend Dr. Pauli Murray. But before we do that, I would like to welcome you to the Episcopal Women's History Project. My name is Jane Kim. I am the president. I'm also a priest in the Diocese of New York. If you would like to support our ministries, please plan to join us, be a member. You can find more details about the things that we do, who are involved on our website, EWHP.org, EWHP.org. You can also find the Woman's Prayer that we just prayed on our website. Exciting things coming up. We are going to have our conference, 2026 EWHP conference in June. The registration is open. It's going to be in Nashville, Tennessee, and our keynote speaker will be the Reverend Becca Stevens from Cecil Farms. And we will have many others who are presenting their papers. We'll have opportunities to meet each other, talk about our shared ministries. So please join us for our conference. And if you're interested, please support us by becoming a member. Without further ado, I would like to introduce Sandra Squires, our board member, secretary, and she's going to introduce our speaker today. I will unmute you.
thank you. Well, I want to tell you about one of our board members because she, first of all, stepped in and helped us out when we had a cancellation, as did our other board member who stepped in at the beginning. So today we have Heather Huyck. Heather is a lifelong Episcopalian, and she is a public historian who specializes in the history of American women. As a history graduate student at the University of Minnesota, she got to know two of the original Philadelphia 11 priests, the Reverend Doctors Jeannette Piccard and Alla Bozarth-Campbell. She and her mother witnessed the amazing service in July of 1974. Afterwards, she became an organizer to support them and switched her dissertation topic to an oral history of women's ordination to celebrate a whole priesthood. As part of her research, she interviewed the Reverend Dr. Pauli Murray and will share how she thanked Dr. Murray for her generosity. Huyck then had a career with the National Park Service and with U.S. Congress, and later taught at the College of William and Mary. She is a board member for EWHP and is on the National Collaborative for Women's History Sites, and she is with us today. Thank you so much, Heather, for being here.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome from snowy Washington, D.C. So today I want to invite you to come with us to learn about Pauli Murray. On July 29th, 1974, the first 11 women priests in the Episcopal Church were ordained at the Church of the Advocate in Philadelphia. Pauli Murray was not one of them. As a constitutional lawyer, she did not support their technically illegal action, although she was a witness to that amazing service. As Sandra just said, I got to know the two women priests from Minnesota, Alla Bozarth-Campbell and Jeannette Piccard, celebrating here their first anniversary, and wrote my dissertation on the fight, and it was a fight, to get women priests in the Episcopal Church. So I knew them, and I became an organizer for them. And then in March 1977, I went to Pauli Murray's small Alexandria, Virginia apartment to interview her and research her files, as she was the first Black woman priest. She was ordained at the Washington Cathedral in January of 1977. I had no inkling of her other impressive accomplishments and her contributions to American law, civil rights, and our lives. Her living room was full of cabinets and bookshelves, looking like a crammed research library. She once said, "A woman and a typewriter equals a revolution," and she lived that. She was extremely gracious. She let me interview her and research her impressive files, a few of which you see here, along with all kinds of books. And then she left me with her files, trusting me with them, saying she was going to take her dog out for a walk. She didn't return for a long time. So long I got quite concerned. She was a very petite, older woman in a not great neighborhood, and there I was sitting in her living room/library. She finally returned after dark and blithely explained she was trying to give me more time with her files. So she came home quite safely, and I was quite appreciative of what she did, and I wanted to do something to thank her, but I didn't know what I could do except say that. So then I heard about the Pauli Murray Center for History and Social Justice in Durham, North Carolina, and they were working to preserve her family home. Pauli Murray, the Reverend Doctor, was known as an African American, was truly multidimensional, with many facets and disappointments in her personal life, and left such a legacy. She connected to key people. She connected with Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Strom Thurmond, and many other people, not Strom Thurmond, please. She wanted to go to the University of North Carolina and was told she was Black, which she knew, and refused admission, and Harvard, and was told she was female and refused admission. She struggled with her sexuality and relationships. She was often impoverished, often rebellious from childhood, and lonely and restless. So she did not have an easy personal life. Her mother died when she was a toddler. Her father was murdered. He was a brilliant man, had been a high school principal, but a trustee in the Maryland State Hospital for the insane, for the Black insane, had murdered him. She then moved to be with her maiden aunts and her grandparents in Durham. So her life was a difficult one, but she did not let it stop her. In law school, she coined the term Jane Crow, which is very apropos, putting together both sexism and racism into one two-word phrase. And now we have concepts that she did not have for being a trans person. She was not the Black woman she often presented. She felt that she was actually a male in a female body. And when I exalted to her that you're the first Black woman priest, she responded to me and said, no, I'm a mixtie, meaning that she came from many different backgrounds. Now the Episcopal Church recognizes her as a holy person. So there were many Pauli Murrays. The dude who wore male clothes, she once wore male clothes to cross this country to get back to her aunt, who served as her mother, wearing men's clothes because she was covering 3,000 miles in 10 days, hopping freights, something I doubt any of us are about to do. She was a tenured professor at Brandeis for a while, and then she was also a founder of the National Organization for Women. And there you see the one and only Betty Friedan and Pauli Murray and other early feminists. She graduated from high school at 15, although because she was African American, high school in Durham only went to 11th grade. So she moved to New York, made up the time, and went to Hunter College, which allowed women to go there without paying tuition, but she still had to make her room and board and really had to scrape to do that. An event that I will share in just a minute encouraged her to go to Howard University's law school, which she did. She was the only female in the class. Initially, her classmates were not at all pleased or respectful of her. However, she managed to be first in the class, and they had a very different attitude towards her by then. She went out to the University of California, Berkeley, and got herself the equivalent of a master's in law. And then years later, she was able to go to Yale and get herself a doctorate. And then on January 8th, 1977, Bishop Creighton ordained her to the priesthood in the Washington National Cathedral. When I say she has many facets, I hope that is quite clear to all of you. She also was a poet. Here she's reading Dark Testament, and I want you to look not only at her book, but the ferocity in her face at that point. She was determined, and she was going to make change, and she believed change was possible and important. 3 examples of times like that. If you look in the upper left, you'll see on the 4th line, Miss Pauli Murray and companion jailed in Virginia. In 1940, she and a companion were going back to Durham for Easter. The bus seat was very uncomfortable, and she was breaking the rules in terms of blacks loading from the back and staying in the back. And she offended the bus driver, which apparently happened quite easily. The next thing she knew, she was under arrest. They were both under arrest. And they decided, as some other people in the early civil rights, decided to practice Gandhian principles. So they worked to be very nice to the jailers and to the other prisoners who were soon asking them for legal advice. And I can only imagine how the response was when the governor of Virginia told the head of the jail that, by the way, the First Lady of the U.S., the one and only Eleanor Roosevelt, a friend of Pauli Murray, had called and inquired about how she was doing. I doubt that the governor of Virginia or the head of the Petersburg jail had any inkling that that was going to happen. But they were very deliberate in practicing principles of kindness and love in a very nasty situation. And this is 15 years before Rosa Parks. In 1966, she's sitting way in the back there, and she's working to establish the National Organization for Women, which she saw as a parallel for the NAACP for Blacks. She had worked with the NAACP repeatedly and also tried repeatedly to get them to do more. So there she is, and it was a short period that she was with now, but that's part of her story. And then when she died in 1985, she rated an obituary in the New York Times. One of the most interesting pieces was in law school, she began to articulate and wrote a major paper saying that the 14th Amendment could be used to argue against segregation. It could be used to overturn Plessy versus Ferguson, which was the law for separate accommodations, separate train cars, separate everything that she had suffered from so repeatedly, and she often walked to avoid getting on such public transportation. So when the one and only Ruth Bader Ginsburg wrote the brief for Reed versus Reed in her early effort and quite considerable effort to change the law, you'll see in red that she cited Pauli Murray as one of the authors of the brief because Pauli Murray had made such a difference when they were both at the ACLU in articulating and understanding the use of the 14th Amendment. Her professors at first were like, oh, this isn't going to work. And then they took it and they used it for Brown v. Board. She also has her own personal library of books. Proud Shoes was 1955. It's a family history. I strongly recommend it to anyone who, particularly as an introduction to the complexities of American racial relationships. In 1962, she went to Ghana, which was then newly freed, and worked to set up the constitution and government of Ghana. She stayed there for several years and wrote this up. But then she felt that Nkrumah was getting too autocratic and she came back. But one of the most important things that she did was put together the state's laws on race and color. And the state's law on race and color, Thurgood Marshall called it the Bible on race, the Bible for civil rights, because it was so complete and exhaustive, and he used it as he was writing Brown v. Board and other major cases. Song in a Weary Throat, she wrote, and actually was published posthumously, so it covers a later period in her life than Proud Shoes. And then she also, as I mentioned, wrote Dark Testaments, a series of poetry, and there are several books of her sermons and speeches that Anthony Pinn has collected. So if you want to learn about Pauli Murray from her, here's your opportunity. So I want to turn now and share a bit of how I've found a way to thank Pauli Murray for her generosity. National Historic Landmarks are in between in the national preservation world, the American preservation world. They're in between the National Register of Historic Places and national park sites. They have to have exceptional national significance, high integrity of design and workmanship. In other words, a pile of lumber or an adobe structure that's melted away won't work. Or if there's a situation where the building once was intact and now is all shattered and you can't tell who had what and has been redone, that won't count. And it must have a strong association with critical American history and represent themes, ideas, or individuals that shaped the nation. And generally, it has to be at least 50 years old. So landmarks are made up of tangible resources, the physical, the buildings, the landscapes, and in this case, the neighborhood of the Bottoms and the cemetery that I'll show you in just a minute. Significance, the recognition of the person or event, the knowledge base, the research that gives us the context and the specifics so that we're not just making it up, we're telling the way it was. And there must be supporters, people who believe it's important that they make this a National Historic Landmark, which also requires both financial and organizational resources. There was a real problem with Pauli Murray, which was that in 22 years, she lived in 42 different places. She was constantly moving. I've picked one page from her FBI file. And you can see here that from December 1933 to January 1934, she lived at 901 Rhode Island Avenue, road being misspelled there, it should be the state, which was the Phyllis Wheatley YWCA in the District of Columbia. So she's moving constantly. She'll pile all her books and her papers and her typewriter in her VW Bug and go wherever she needs to go. So there's a peripatetic part, which made it difficult because the rule is that you generally, a rule sometimes broken, generally can only have one place per person as a National Historic Landmark. So one of the early challenges was trying to figure out the best place. And you can see here, she's got Los Angeles, she's got Berkeley, Oakland, New Jersey, you name it. She's probably been all over the country. But it was handy to have an FBI file. Fortunately, there was a group already in Durham working with as the Pauli Murray Center, and a woman named Barbara Lau was very active and determined to preserve the house, and that was the beginning of a journey together. Way up the road, you can see the family house, and in front, you can see the building that they hope to make into a visitor center so that the context of the story can be told. The family house was built in 1898. It was very well built, as we've seen as we take it apart. It was what we call vernacular structure, a story and a half. You'll notice that the windows here are sort of a half story. Her grandfather, Robert Fitzgerald, who had fought for the Union Army and who had an injury which made him blind and really ended his brickmaking career, built the house, and her grandmother, Cornelia Fitzgerald, was also there, as well as the two maiden aunts. Robert was very proud of his Union service. Cornelia was the daughter of a Black enslaved woman and her owner's son. Think about that for a minute. But Cornelia was very proud of her lighter color and her background. Notice also the tree and the front porch. And you can't see what's behind, but they grew almost all of their food, both fruit orchards and vegetables, and the four of them lived in this house. Originally behind the house was a wheat field. And that wheat field they had a lien on it, and they were going to raise wheat. But then the city of Durham decided it would become a cemetery. And so it was a whites-only cemetery immediately behind the house. The house is down the hill from the cemetery, which meant that effluent, I'm being very polite here, and it was a very impolite situation, flowed down that hill underneath the house, and it stank. They protested, they tried to get it changed without any success at all. And there they lived in genteel poverty with basically the very slight income of the two maiden aunts who were both teachers and her grandfather's veteran's pension. Those three adults made quite a difference in her life. She was well loved, but they were very adult people. They were not kids to play with. She was not to play with the other kids in the bottoms. And so it was a lonely life, even though it was a well-loved one. And then in 2015, the woman on the right in the red dress called me and said, we are looking for a place, a historic site, that will tell the history of Black women. Do you have a suggestion? And I said, piece of cake, no problem. Pauli Murray's home in Durham is fabulous and needs to be recognized, and she needs more recognition. So Karen Nicholas here was very important, as was Barbara Lau. as was the board of the Pauli Murray House, and in 2015, it was successful in becoming a National Trust for Historic Preservation national treasure. And you can see that by then, the porch is being held up with more modern metal instead of the original wood. If you look not even very carefully, you can also see that the porch roof was in real trouble. And there was a lot of issues with the porch and the house. The front door had become simply a piece of plywood. The woman holding the "This Place Matters" on the left is an archaeologist, Anna Agby Davies, who later did the archaeological work. Beth Boland was National Park Service. Okoro did a lot of the deconstruction. Here's Karen Nicholas, and there I am in a hard hat, just to show you I really was there. Part of what you do in these situations is a great deal of research. So there was a historic structure report, which really looked at everything you could find out about the building using oral history and text documents. And then Anna Agby Davies, Dr. Anna Agby Davies, is shown here working on the archaeology to see what else you could find. And you still see the wooden posts for the front porch. Deconstructing a historic building before you can put it back together is usually a fairly complicated process. It also involves a lot of tedious, careful work. Here you see that the house had 1, 2, 3 chimneys, and maybe a fourth there. The main house is on the left. On the far right was the kitchen, and in between they had added a bathroom whose floor was completely rotted, which is not unusual in these situations. And if you look very carefully, you can see the slant of that hill. It was pretty dreadful. In the house, the front right room was the bedroom for the 2 grandparents. The front left was the living room, which was Pauli Murray's favorite room as a child. She went there to read and just be by herself. The dining room, the kitchen, the bathroom, and once there was a door that went outside from the kitchen. From that front bedroom, this is during the process of deconstruction. Here's the front door. You're in the front bedroom, front window. Here are the stairs, and you can see that the wainscoting still remains, but the lath, which are the horizontal strips of wood, have been removed, and the plasters obviously removed. Another picture of that same room, that front bedroom. So they're only heating with fire, with their fireplaces. And then going up the stairs to the second floor, and these are all original banisters. Again, you can see the ghosts, as they say, from the lath and plaster, and the intact wainscoting. And here on the landing to the second floor was where they had Pauli Murray's crib as a 3-year-old, which is kind of amazing to me, the idea that you would entrust a 3-year-old to be on the landing of the stairs. And there is some lath on the left that is intact. The bedroom upstairs on the right, the left shows before restoration. Again, you see that half window, which is part of how we know that it was a vernacular structure and not built from fancy plans. And then on the right, it's how it is now. One of the people who talked about her wrote, "Murray's insights about Jane Crow grew out of 30 years of reflection, activism, and scholarship about Black freedom." And I wanted to add her personal life. She turned her personal life tragedies inside out into amazing insights and actions. And I think it's really important to think about, she could have become a very unhappy, bitter person with all the stuff that she details that happened to her. But instead, she was a very joyful and powerful and generous human being. And I think we need to recognize what she did. So I like the phrase, turning your life inside out. Today, there's the house restored with, again, that cemetery back behind there. So we had to start to figure out how to get it to be a National Historic Landmark. I do not ask or expect you to read all these different organizations. I simply want you to get a sense of how much it takes. So the National Collaborative had the contract. We managed the contract. We worked with the Pauli Murray Center, now called the Pauli Murray Center for History and Social Justice, the National Collaborative, the National Trust for Historic Preservation, and the National Park Service. Everybody had to read everything, and everybody basically had to agree on everything as the research went ahead. So we reviewed the nomination. We then recruited letters to support the nomination. The Pauli Murray Center had the lead in presenting the nomination to the Secretary of the Interior's Advisory Board, but we were very fortunate because there were Park Service staff who were very keen to make this happen. If they weren't, we wouldn't have a National Historic Landmark today. The landmark nomination is basically the same as a master's thesis. It ran to 60 pages single space and has 187 footnotes. So if you're thinking of writing one overnight, good luck. It goes off of the criteria, and in this case, it's creating social institutions and movements and shaping the political landscape. If I had my way, I would talk about religion there, but that wasn't my approach, my choice. You also have the women's rights, civil rights, the law. The other issue is that there's much more understood about her sexuality now than then. And I would say more about her sexuality should have been included. So religion and sex and religion, two pretty important topics. We were able to get 37 letters of support for the designation, including the National Collaborative, the Hanbury Preservation Consulting, the Episcopal presiding bishop, the Union of Black Episcopalians, and everybody else we could think of to get 37 separate letters. They were considered by the Secretary of the Interior's Advisory Board in June of 2016, shown here. That is a group of national experts in all kinds of different fields. They read all the different nominations and vote, and there are certainly quite a few nominations that are not accepted, but to our delight, this one was. And here you see two of the board members from the Pauli Murray Center's reaction after that they found out that it had been approved at this level. It then has to go to the Secretary of the Interior for further approval, and in this case, she approved it, and that worked well. And here they wrote, the Pauli Murray family home in Durham, North Carolina is associated with groundbreaking civil rights activist, lawyer, educator, writer, and Episcopal priest, Pauli Murray. She served as a bridge figure. And there is the plaque that we all worked so hard for, and that really marks it as a very, very special place. She also was recognized by the Episcopal Church as a holy person, along with Thurgood Marshall, who she obviously knew quite well. And she did not know Florence Lee Tim Oy. Many of you I'm sure know who Florence Lee Tim Oy was. She was the first woman ordained priest in the Anglican Communion in 1944. She was ordained in Hong Kong to go behind the Japanese lines to minister to the Chinese, which still is awesome. And I should add that when Barbara Harris was consecrated, Lee Tim Oy was there, which was pretty amazing. Pauli Murray also scored a marker, and a couple of years ago, a coin, which was one of the quarters of women's history. There are also a number of books about her. I recommend the book Jane Crow. I think Rosalind Rosenberg did a really good job. There's a book, Pauli Murray, The Life of a Pioneering Feminist and Civil Rights Activist, co-written by Pauli Murray's niece, which is quite good. It's designed for young adults and poetry, and it does a great job. The Firebrand and the First Lady really gives a sense of the relationship between Pauli Murray and Eleanor Roosevelt. There's another national park that recently came into being, which is Francis Perkins. So we have Thurgood Marshall, Pauli Murray, Eleanor Roosevelt, and Francis Perkins, the same eras, basically, and they were all good Episcopalians. I had to add that. Pauli Murray Center for History and Social Justice has a wonderful, impressive collection of programs. They have online and in-person tours, dialogues, exhibits, educational programs. They celebrate her birthday. They hold pilgrimages, including to the nearby St. Titus, which is where Murray's uncle was a priest for many years before he moved to Eastern Shore of Maryland. Writing sessions, dog walks with appropriate outfits for the dogs, a social justice fellowship, and a name change clinic, which is private for those people who are transitioning in their sex. The center hopes to end up, here's the home, there's that cemetery, and then on the right, they want that to become a visitor center and have parking over here. So that's a future hope. And imagine that once this was all growing field for all of their fruits and vegetables. And here's Pauli Murray in one of her many, sort of like a cat, one of her many lives. I want to finish by noting that a month ago, I went online to the National Park Service site to find the nomination for the Pauli Murray family home, the National Historic Landmark nomination. And I encountered page not found. We're sorry, we can't find the page you're looking for. The site administrator may have removed it, changed its location, or made it otherwise unavailable. This is happening on all kinds of women's history and Black history and other history, gay history as well. With the current administration, and you'll see that dread error code 404. So it's really important that we defend these sites, that we let people know that we cherish them. Many of the sites are having extremely limited hours, as low as 13 hours a week, at which point they will then be able to argue that they don't get many visitors, so therefore they are a waste of tax dollars, and they want to get rid of them out of the national park system of 433 parks. It can have a different name. It can be a National Historic Landmark or a national park. It is still a Park Service park unit. So don't let them fool you on that. And it's really important that we defend those sites. The Pauli Murray site, being a National Historic Landmark, is somewhat protected, but they have already lost funding. So it's really important that we make it clear we want to tell the whole story. We want to have all Americans included. And I thank you so much for your attention and for being here and supporting the Reverend Dr. Pauli Murray. I'm sorry your computer doesn't have a camera. I'm looking at the chat. This will be up online, and at that point you should be able to see it. I'm delighted that rainy Oregon is here and we have snowy Maryland, so thank you. You're in love with the Reverend Pauli. Well, many people are. She was quite amazing. You signed one of the letters. Oh, of course you did, Joan. You were this 36, right? We all were signing letters and writing letters and going there and trying whatever we could to help her recognition. Are there other questions or comments? Yes, Marianne, do you have a question? Can we unmute Marianne, please? I can't unmute you. I'm trying to see if somebody else can.
Oh, I can. Now the sign came up.
There you go.
So much. I know, I'm a little over the moon here. I just feel like you just gave me a brand new heroine, and I just didn't know she existed. I feel like almost crying. I really do. Um, I'm just curious. Both of her aunts were educators. What kind of schooling did she have? Was she able to go to it's probably a segregated little school in Durham, or what do you know? And do you know anything about that?
Well, I'd have to get the book to give you the precise details, but one of her aunts took her was teaching in an elementary class. It was, of course, segregated. And she needed a way to take care of her niece, who was 4. And so she took Pauli Murray with her. Pauli Murray sat in the back of the room drawing away and just sort of being there. And then she discovered that Pauli Murray could read what she was talking about. And so she assumed Pauli Murray had memorized it, and she just was sitting there memorizing, and she gave Pauli Murray something else to read. And at that point, she realized that her niece had been sitting in the back of the classroom at age 4 and 5 and learning how to read for real. So she had that. And then she was in high school in Durham. In those days, many states only had one high school for Blacks in an entire state. And I haven't found whether there were any other high schools except Durham. There may have been, but fortunately there was one in Durham. But like other places, like Virginia, it only went to 11th grade, which is just so weird. And so she had to kind of make that gap year that was imposed upon her. And that's when she went to New York and was at Hunter. And she had relatives in New York. So she's in New York. She's trying to decide whether to be in New York or North Carolina, but she much preferred New York because she wasn't under the same restrictions that good old South Virginia had put on her. So she ended up getting herself her high school degree, her college degree, her master's in the law, her MDiv, and a doctorate in the law.
Wait, where did the MDiv come from? I missed that.
Well, as Joan pointed out, the MDiv came from General Theological Seminary, and she and Jeannette Piccard overlapped for a little bit, and I can only imagine the two of them together. I would never want to be in between the two of those. Talk about two determined human beings. They were both wonderfully and lovingly ferocious.
Wow.
So yes, start with Proud Shoes. That's a good place to start.
Good. I will.
Please share her everywhere you can, because
I will.
Her work on the 14th Amendment. I mean, she did all these things, but the 14th Amendment is probably long-term the most important piece.
I will do that. Thank you so much.
Okay. Joan, I know you'll have a question. You have to unmute yourself.
I can't see. Okay. Oh,
Yep.
My other comment is
We can't hear you.
you can't hear me. Okay, what have I got to do here?
Speak real loud.
Yeah, we can hear you, but it's really, really small.
How about now? Is that
It's got to
better?
scream.
Yell at us.
Okay, hang on a minute. I want to make sure I've got the. Let's see. Does that better?
Yes.
Okay. The other thing is while she's in law school, she mentors the undergraduate women at Howard to run sit-ins at a local restaurant. She's doing that again in the 40s, long before the sit-in movement in the 1960s.
You're right. And the only problem was that Howard gets federal funding. It's in the District of Columbia. And the Congress said that if the students kept doing that, they would cut all funding to Howard University. So they very reluctantly had to stop.
But they did desegregate the two key there was two key restaurants they got desegregated.
They did desegregate key restaurants. And the other thing I love about her time at Howard was the undergraduate students began to discover that she was given space in a sort of an anteroom that had just enough room for a bed, her trunk, and a little desk. And they began to go and meet her. And I think they got their own education. So it was pretty amazing. Someone else had a question? Sandra. Thank you, Joan. You need to unmute, Sandra. Unmute, please. There you go.
Okay. About a year or two ago, the Diocese of Nebraska hosted, in collaboration with the Mixed Chorus, which is a gay and lesbian and transgender chorus here in town, they co-hosted a weekend and had an incredible musical event that took the things about her life, and they had been set to music, and they did a full concert. It was premiered here in Omaha. I'm not sure who wrote it at the moment. I don't know, but it was an incredible weekend because it helped so many people learn about her, um, across the entire city, and I'm sure across, the state. But it was spectacular, and I was so proud of the fact that the Diocese of Nebraska, the Episcopal Diocese, was a co-host of that event.
Terrific, terrific. Thank you. That's what we should all be doing. So, Tula Lacey, you have a question. Is there information about how she determined her sexuality? So, as a kid, she liked wearing pants a lot and we'd say was a tomboy, but they're tomboys who are not lesbians. But she actually tried to get medical help to find out. She thought there were somehow male parts within her and wanted surgery for that. She wanted to be treated with hormones. I mean, she was pretty certain about it pretty early. I think we'd have to go and look at her incredible collection at the Schlesinger Library in Cambridge at Harvard to read that and find out more about the precise timing. But it's pretty clear that, well, for example, her name was Pauline, and she decided she liked Pauli. So she's, like many people, pretty clear pretty early. But she simply didn't have the language and the opportunity that we have today. On the other hand, certainly when I met her, I had no hint whatsoever in the way she was presenting. She looked, I mean, Jeannette Piccard always wore a black shirt and a black pants, and her hair up. So the two of them actually look pretty similar. They like the Roman Catholic style of collar as well. So I had no sense of her sexuality except as an amazing, generous person. I only wish I could have asked her more questions. And I did see her a few times after that and get to know her a little bit more, but that was really important. Both of them are women who challenges us. Some other questions, please.
I think there is a question in the chat where she's asking how the Episcopal Church sharing the story of Reverend Pauli Murray beyond this webinar.
Well, she's now a holy person, so we recognize her and Thurgood Marshall once a year. And I want to say July 1st, but I'm not positive on that. And she should be recognized a lot. And, it's now been over 50 years since the July 29th event. And those of us who were there or old enough to remember, it was cataclysmic. And there were some pretty angry people about it. And I just said to a person this afternoon, I think this is a different Episcopal church than where you grew up. And I think it's a better one, and it's less snooty and it's more welcoming, like our sign. And I said, please try again. Try us again. This will be put up on the EWHP webinar on our YouTube. So that's one possibility. And thank you, Liz. It is indeed July 1st. So we can all do something outrageously wonderful on July 1st. I should add that, these roles, these women did not have easy lives. Part of it was the horrors of the Great Depression. Part of it was the horrors of vicious racism and sexism. And yet, and there were times, certainly with Jeannette Piccard, for whom the Piccard family is how Star Trek named the Captain Piccard, everybody. Okay. And she was the first American woman to have a balloon license in the days when pressurized balloons were hot stuff. But I think that the more we can share these women and make it clear what they did and their faithfulness and their determination is really important. And yes, Rosita Stevens Halsey is the one who wrote the youth book. And Rosita is wonderful, and the book is wonderful. I find the book one of the books I'm subtly not recommending as strongly.
All right, so there are a few comments in the chat. Reverend Pauli Murray's niece, Rosita Stevens Halsey, wrote about her. Pauli Murray, the life of a pioneering feminist and civil rights activist, and Pauli is also in the National Women's Hall of Fame. Thank you, Heather, so much. One, doing this last minute, but two, also sharing such an important history of Pauli Murray in the Episcopal Church and in our world. So thank you so much, Heather.
You're welcome.
And thank you, everyone who's joined us today. As we have announced, this will be uploaded on our YouTube channel. The link is in the chat. We can put it again up there. Please go check out other Lenten series that has been done this year, but also in previous years. All of those videos are available on our YouTube channel. Please subscribe, please be our member, and join us in our conference in Nashville, Tennessee in June. We will see you next Thursday. Thank you.
Thank you.